Hello and welcome to all of you. Good morning or afternoon or evening. I'm very happy that you are able to join us for this second of the global sessions that are part of the JCoR training program for digital delegates to the 2025 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. And I know that many of you were able to be with us for our first call, which was at the end of January, at which we introduced some foundational elements of our understanding of how and why we are motivated to participate in a political process and in a political space that would appear very secular, even though we are a community of congregations of Catholic sisters, priests, and brothers, as well as their many partners in mission. And so today in our program, we will build upon that foundation by exploring more about the specific details of the forum that we are all preparing to participate in together, which is, of course, the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, which you will hear me refer to many, many times as the HLPF. Or for those who are communicating in Spanish or Portuguese, the FPAN. So we will explore today some of the important information about that forum and how we are able to participate in it as members of civil society rather than representatives of government. For anyone who did not have the opportunity to be with us for the first call and who may be new to the world of JCoR, I also want to very briefly introduce myself. My name is Teresa Blumenstein, and I am the coordinator of the Justice Coalition of Religious. So I have the privilege and the pleasure to work among the many representatives of religious congregations who have a presence at United Nations headquarters in New York. So before we say any more about our content for today's session, let us begin with a short prayer whose themes will become clearly connected to our content for today as we go along. Gracious God, you open our eyes and our ears in order that we may see that our world is wounded by falsehoods and lies. You open our hearts in order that we may feel the ways in which these falsehoods hide and perpetuate the suffering of so many peoples, of other living creatures, and of the earth. When we witness the agony of creation, make us bold enough to speak the truth, as you did for Moses when you spoke to him from the burning bush, saying, "Go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." Though our pain makes us impatient for change, guide our steps and our speech so that we may always be kind toward all, good and patient teachers who are gentle as we correct our opponents. For it may be that you will give them the opportunity to repent and come to know the truth. God, grant us the grace to communicate the truth in both our words and in our actions. Grant us the grace to rise above bitterness and anger in order that we may speak the truth in love and grow to become the mature body of Christ. Amen. Thank you all for joining me in that. Now we proceed with our learning objectives for today. And so the first is to get a basic understanding that we can share about this forum, a high-level political forum on sustainable development, which, because it is such a mouthful, such a long term, we will almost always refer to as HLPF. And so the reason that we put so much energy and give so much attention into preparing for this forum is because it is very important to us as people who are concerned about the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that they are an agenda that is very ambitious and very beautiful, but of course, it has the possibility to exist only as words on paper if the entire global community is not working together to ensure that the agenda is being implemented in a way that reaches the most vulnerable and the most marginalized, and those who have been most deprived of the fruits of genuine sustainable development. And so because that is a huge area of concern for us as people of faith and as congregations who have a presence at the United Nations, we take very seriously the forum at which this agenda, these sustainable development goals, are reviewed and monitored. And the HLPF is the primary opportunity for a global level review of all nations' progress toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So this forum is held every year in the month of July in New York, which is, of course, the location of the headquarters of the United Nations. And during each year's forum, governments are invited to present progress reports, which, again, I say invited because these reports are given on a voluntary basis. So governments are not required or compelled to make these reports and to present them. But fortunately, most governments have voluntarily made a presentation more than once at this point since the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals in the year 2015. There are still a few countries that have not engaged in the process, but almost every government has. And so this has been a rich forum and a place for sharing updates on how each country is doing in terms of moving forward toward the achievement of the SDGs. And so the reports that governments are presenting in the context of this forum are known as voluntary national reviews. And this is another very important term, and also one that we will usually describe with an acronym to make it easier for ourselves. And so in English, we will know these as VNRs. And then in Spanish, los ENV. And in Portuguese, RNVs. But you can see the full name to understand the acronym in each of our languages there on the screen. And a very important feature from our perspective, of course, of this forum is that it is not only a space for government to offer their progress reports on their work toward achievement of the SDGs, but there is also some space, though it is a limited space, but there is some space for civil society groups like ourselves to also present our perspectives on how much progress our own governments and our own nations are truly making toward the SDGs, which in many cases means also using that space to name the ways in which we are not making progress toward achievement of the SDGs. And one of the concrete and immediate outcomes of this whole process is that at the end of each forum, governments will produce a declaration, which is essentially a summary or a synthesis of their shared observations of what kinds of themes they have seen from the whole presentation, the whole collection of presentations from different governments, as well as from members of civil society. And another component of this declaration is also that the governments will agree on some shared intentions and some shared goals and strategies for how they will perhaps accelerate or improve the quality of their implementation of the goals in the years ahead. And it is important to know that not every government will make a presentation every year. And that is probably a very good thing, because for those of us who will attend the majority of the sessions in the forum, you will know that it takes a huge amount of time to be able to hear the presentations of different governments and civil society. And if we were to hear from every country, we would probably only have maybe 2 minutes to hear from each one, which is very little time to say anything of substance. And so because they limit the number of countries that are able to present a report each year, we are able to have a little bit more time to hear from each one and to get a bit more detail from them in their reports. And so there are about 40 countries that will report each year. And so this year, among those who will present, I have put a few on the screen from which we have members in the world as our global community of religious. And so hopefully you see your country there. And that is the same group of countries, whoever is reporting in any given year, that is who we invite to be part of this training process and program, because you will have the opportunity to engage in some analysis as we proceed through the program, to assess the report that is made by your own government and the presentation that they will give during the forum in July. Another useful piece of information to have about the forum is that every year it has a theme. And in the usual fashion or manner of the United Nations, the theme is a very, very long phrase that may seem a little bit confusing. And that has to do with the fact that there are very many people who each wanted a particular word to appear in that final version of the theme. And because of that, the end result tends to look like what I would call a word salad, meaning too many words that don't exactly fit together in a way that feels natural and meaningful to us. And so I want to introduce the original version of the theme first, but I promise then we will have a bit more of a normal description of it. We will unpack it or decode it a little bit together. So the original version, which you can see on your screen now, is advancing sustainable, inclusive, science and evidence-based solutions for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals for leaving no one behind. So the most important component of that phrase is the first line, and a half. The second part is essentially the same every year, which is just to remind us that every part of the conversation that we are having in the context of this forum is directed toward the Sustainable Development Goals. It's saying, how are we doing in our work to achieve those goals? So the part to really give our attention to is that first line. And so we will work on understanding that a little bit together in just a moment. But for now, I want to introduce the other important component of the theme for each year, which is that each year from the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there are just 5 that are selected as the priority SDGs for that year. And so they are kind of a theme in their own way, in that the reports are sort of oriented around those goals and give more emphasis and attention to those goals. And the other smaller events that happen during the forum tend to be events, panel discussions, testimony that are very focused on one of or more of these 5 selected goals. And again, similar to the reason for having only 40 governments make a presentation each year, the reason for selecting 5 SDGs is that 17 is an awful lot of different ideas and goals to focus on at the same time. And so in order to give quality attention to each goal, they decided, let us have a focus of just 5 for each year, so we can give better attention to those. And we will rotate them from year to year so that each goal will have its year several times. So the 5 goals that are our priority for this year's forum will be goal number 3, good health and well-being for all. Goal number 5, gender equality. Goal number 8, decent work and economic security. Goal number 14, healthy aquatic ecosystems. which is to say healthy oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers. And finally, goal number 17, which is partnerships to support the entire agenda, all of the SDGs together, because each one requires collaboration across many sectors and many different types of people. So now I will return, as promised, to that word salad, that crazy collection of words in our theme for the year. And so to give a slightly more plain and straightforward explanation of the terms that are included there, what we are really saying with this theme is that this forum in 2025 is calling on peoples of the world, governments, and civil society for the proposal and the illumination of solutions. And the meaning of solutions is policies, programs, practices, strategic approaches to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And while calling for these types of solutions, there are particular qualities or characteristics that we are seeking. We're seeking solutions that have particular qualities. And so those qualities are that they be sustainable, inclusive, and that they be based in science and evidence. And so I will also unpack a little bit by what we mean by those three qualities. When we say we want solutions that are sustainable, we are talking about solutions that are harmonious with the basic needs and health of all living things and ecosystems as a whole. We are not simply saying things that we can continue to do in order to take as the human species from the earth, but ways that we can live in balance with all other living creatures so that everyone can have their time to be restored. When we talk about the quality of solutions being inclusive, we are saying that we want solutions that benefit those who have been the most marginalized or the most vulnerable, those who are most easily left behind unless we as a society make an effort to give attention and ensure that those who are on the margins have access to everything they need, access to the benefits of the work that is happening under this agenda. And finally, when we speak of solutions that are science-based or evidence-based, what we are calling for are solutions that are rooted in facts and reality. Another way of putting that is we are looking for solutions that have already been proven or demonstrated to yield some kind of positive result or outcome. And particularly, we want solutions that have been measured, that have been observed carefully and systematically in order to prove the positive outcome and the positive result. So this forum is all about solutions for our development challenges that are sustainable, inclusive, and based in science and evidence. Now, the next part of our session today will explore what are actually some larger, complicated themes and challenges in our global discourse, in our global society, which is that sometimes we experience a large gap between the concept of what is true and the story that we are hearing, the popular narrative. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the distinction between these two terms and the role that this gap plays in the need for development, and what our role is in trying to reconcile or close or make that gap smaller. So just to give us a common place to begin, though I'm sure everyone knows these terms in some way, is to make a distinction, first of all, between what we mean when we say truth and what we mean when we say narrative. So truth being our genuine reality, the lived experience, the real life of people and ecosystems in our world today. What is truly, genuinely happening. And then when we use the word narrative, we are talking about the story that is being told or the image that is being projected when people communicate about that reality. So trying to relay it from one to another, from someone who is not experiencing it directly, to receive the ideas from someone who has experienced it directly, or so very often to get it secondhand or third hand or thousandth hand, quite removed from someone who has experienced it directly. And so because of that factor of removal that we don't always hear right from the source of an experience, we find that narratives can have a wide variety of qualities. They might be very faithful to what is truly happening. They might be complete and give us a sense of the truth. But of course, there is also the possibility that what we are being told is accurate. It may not contain any falsehoods, but it may be incomplete. It may be missing very important pieces of the story. And as a result, the outcome, the story we're hearing may be very misleading to us, and may give us a false impression. Even if nothing that was said to us in the details was false, our understanding may not be well aligned with the truth after we've heard that story. And finally, another outcome of narrative is that it could, of course, be full of falsehoods, or completely false. And it could be a complete misrepresentation of the reality of the truth, and lead us to believe something quite opposite to what is true. So just as a place for beginning, we have the truth, the genuine experience, and we have narrative, the story that we hear. And this distinction is something that concerns us quite a bit, both as people of faith and as people who are concerned about human rights, who are concerned about justice in general. And as an example of that, I found a very lovely quotation from our Pope John Paul II in his encyclical Veritatis Splendor that I thought would be helpful and relevant to share among ourselves today. And so Pope John Paul II reminded us that the supreme good and the moral good meet in truth. The truth of God, the Creator and Redeemer, and the truth of humanity, who were created and redeemed by God. Only upon this truth is it possible to construct a renewed society and to solve the complex and weighty problems affecting it. Above all, the problem of overcoming the various forms of totalitarianism, so as to make way for the authentic freedom of the person. Totalitarianism arises out of a denial of truth in the objective sense. So there's a bit of another simple definition regarding narrative, a denial of truth. If there is no transcendent truth, then there is no sure principle for guaranteeing just relations between people. Their self-interest as a class, a group, or a nation would inevitably set them in opposition to one another. If one does not acknowledge transcendent truth, then the force of power takes over in order to impose his own interests or his own opinion with no regard for the rights of others. So we see there some important language bringing together the idea of a fidelity to truth, a sincere effort to always accurately represent truth in our narratives, and also some talk about the political dangers, the social dangers when we do not hold that utmost respect for truth in our narratives, that we, in fact, are more inclined to find ourselves in conflict with one another. And I think a key phrase from within that quotation is that without this fidelity to truth, there is no principle for guaranteeing just relations between people. So a very strong underlining and emphasis of the role of truth in establishing just relations between people. And so that is also very central to this forum that we are preparing for, and particularly central to our role in that forum, because this gap between truth and common narrative is a huge challenge that we face as people, particularly in any forum where people are communicating about history or about the current events of our day, about what is really happening. So we see that challenge, especially in spaces like the United Nations, which is meant to be a forum for communication about the realities of the world, but really in all fora that are for the purpose of communication, all of the space that we categorize as media, all face this challenge of ensuring that the narrative being presented in their forum is as close as possible to the truth. And it's a huge challenge, even when you are a person or a group of goodwill, to have all of the information and to present it in a straightforward and accurate way is a huge challenge. And now our world finds itself perhaps even more challenged by the fact that there is a lot of falsehood. There is a lot of misinformation that is floating around in our communication spaces. And so we need to kind of sift through and sort through all of that and discern one piece from another to say, is this really true? And what is this really false? And that requires a lot of care and attention. But some of the ways that the United Nations is attempting to meet this challenge in the context of this forum, in which we will be participating, is first, going back to that theme, by asking for solutions to be proposed that are science and evidence-based, which is to say, give us some real concrete evidence to support that whatever you are proposing to prove to us that one, it has actually been implemented before, and two, that it has the kind of positive outcomes that we have all agreed would be beneficial and positive for us as a global community. So that's one way, is trying to encourage that idea that our proposals should be based in science and evidence. And another way that the UN is trying to meet this challenge is by inviting governments to respond to one another's narratives with questions and challenges. So after each presentation by a particular government during this forum, you will hear that other governments will have a chance to kind of ask for an opportunity to speak and to respond, perhaps with a challenging question, or sometimes with positive affirmation of what each government has just presented. So in order to get some challenge from peer to peer, government to government. And very importantly, from our perspective, there is also space for civil society in this forum to respond to their government's narratives with statements or written reports, or by sponsoring events that are also there as part of the forum that include additional perspectives, or in some case, alternate perspectives on the reality and the challenges that are being faced by people in their country. And that is even a space in which civil society can directly, if they wish, address any falsehood that they have identified within the narrative that was presented by the government. So there is an opportunity there for the people to challenge the narrative of the government and to shine a light on perhaps any misinformation that was presented as part of that narrative. And so just to give a little bit of a visual to all of that is to say that when we gather as the high-level political forum, we are really trying to build a global narrative on our progress toward achieving the SDGs. And as you can see in this illustration, there is a very big part of that narrative that will come from national governments, and it will come most commonly from individuals who are speaking on behalf of certain types of ministries within the government. Often they will come from ministries that are dedicated to finance or planning offices. Some will come from a statistics office, others from a development ministry, and others from a ministry that's dedicated to women and children. And then you may also see the participation of those representing local governments or other kind of regional or subnational governments. But then if you look toward that right side of this illustration and you see all of those many smaller circles, those are all different categories of what we would call stakeholders. And they are all members of civil society who have different identities based on either the kind of work that they do, or their gender, or the age group in which they are, or what kinds of physical or developmental ability they have, or perhaps what their migration status is, or in some cases, if they identify with a cultural group, for example, like a religious group. And there are also philanthropic entities that are there, as well as those who are involved in academics, in business, and in the work of increasing our knowledge of science and technology. a huge number of different types of people who are engaged in different endeavors and each who have unique journeys. And all of these people are called stakeholders because each one holds an important piece of the truth. Each one holds an important experience and perspective that is necessary if we are going to have a global narrative that is anywhere close to what is really true. And so it's very important that we who are members of these different small circles, and many of us are probably members of multiple circles, it's important that we use our voices as much as possible, that we contribute our perspectives in order to ensure that the most complete truth, the most complete version of what is true is reflected in this global narrative. Because, of course, the global narrative is what will drive the global response. It is what will determine what problems or challenges get attention and resources and where the work will really happen. And so I have put stars by a few of those small circles just to indicate the circles in which many of us are probably members. And those include circles of non-governmental organizations, women, religious groups, and academia. But of course, each of you as individuals may also belong to multiple other circles that are included in this collection. And these have to do with the many identities that each of us has as individuals and as whole congregations. And so you may be a stakeholder from many different perspectives, and you can bring each one of those when you share your story and your testimony on the truth. And so just to get into a little bit more specific material on what channels are available for input for us as stakeholders or as members of civil society who are trying to contribute to this global narrative on SDG progress, I wanted to explain the main channels for input that are part of this forum. And you can see here the ones that I have highlighted in the deep or bright blue color are the channels in which civil society has a voice and a strong voice. And the two arrows, the two boxes that are in a lighter blue color, those are, you can see they're still blue. They're not a different color because they may involve some input from civil society, but it will be much less input from civil society than those other channels. So those two lighter blue channels are primarily government input, and the darker blue channels are primarily civil society. And so just to give the quick overview, the two mostly government channels for input are, first of all, over here, the reports that governments will present during the forum, those VNRs, Voluntary National Review reports. There's also a forum that happens in advance of each of these global high-level political forums. Each year, every region has its own regional sustainable development forum. And so that is a space where governments meet with other governments from their own region and have kind of a preliminary gathering and try to share ideas and recognize themes among both their successes and their challenges. And that is something that we will talk a little bit more about later today. And then we get into all of these channels that are more available to the voices of civil society. And the first is that there are networks of civil society in almost every country on Earth, and they are operating independently of government, and they are working together to monitor the progress toward the SDGs in their country. And so it's very common for those civil society networks to produce an independent progress report that is their kind of additional, or sometimes you might see it as an alternate or a competing report to share with the world alongside the report that is presented by the government. So that's one place and one way that civil society contribute their input to the global narrative. Another is that there are a few ways to raise your voice kind of in the formal space of the high-level political forum. And that is organized through a channel that is called the major groups and other stakeholders. And that's very specific UN jargon, which is just to say that some of those small circles that you saw on the previous slide, those different groups, whether they're NGOs or women or farmers or indigenous people, each of those is considered a major group or a stakeholder group by the UN. And so each of those groups has an opportunity to come together and to present a collective statement in response to the report of each government. And so that is how civil society is able to raise our voices in that formal, organized space of the forum. And then our third channel over here is that some years, and it's not happening this year, but in the past, there have been years in which the UN conducted an open consultation. They offered a form that was available online through which any person anywhere in the world who had access to internet could go online and go to that form and offer their personal experience and share their personal input on how well any of the SDGs were being implemented in their part of the world. And so that is sometimes a channel that is available to us. But again, it's not available to us this year. And then finally, the last channel for input down here is that there is also a possibility to sponsor events. Usually these are panel discussions or some kind of other informational event that can be part of the HLPF program. And these can be sponsored by civil society, sometimes inside the UN building itself, and sometimes in the neighborhood that is just around the UN building. But this is another way in which we as civil society can present and share our experiences and to lift up the voices of those who are not being reached completely or fully by the work of the government of their country. Now, I will go on to describe each of these channels in a little bit more detail, but before I do that, I just would like to pause because we have been online together for almost an hour now, and I don't want to go too much further without offering an opportunity for some question or comment from anyone here who may have one. So are there any questions or clarifications that anyone would need, or any reaction that anyone would like to share at this time? Yes, Babita and Kayula.
Teresa, thank you very, thank you very much for your presentation. Very touching as usual. I was very struck. I just want to make a comment. I was very struck by, when you were differentiating, you are making a difference between a distinction between truth and narrative. And what struck me was that, there are times that marginalized groups would come to you. Let me just give an example of, in a settlement where people come to you and say, we don't have water. And that's a reality they experience. They do not have water. But sometimes when you just get that story and, take it anywhere, it's not the complete truth. There are other reasons, there are reasons why they don't have water. So one of the things that struck me, what we used to do dialogue meetings. So we'll bring the people that are affected with the providers. And when we bring the two together too, for this dialogue, of course, with other, then you discover that the reason why they are not having water is because they are stealing pipes. So the institution is actually able to pump more water than than the people would actually access. But because within community people are stealing pipes. So I really think I think one of the things that we should always, and which we do actually, is verification. I think I find dialogue meetings quite interesting so that you can come close to the truth as much as possible, because sometimes that narrative could be true, but there is it's not just complete. Thank you.
Thank you. A very good example of how it is often actually a challenge to uncover truth, even with all the best intentions. Yes, Dudia. Excellent example and point to emphasize how important it is to have voices from all parts of society, to get all perspectives, and to ensure that places where decisions are being made and strategies are being built and resources are being allocated, how very important it is that there be a wide variety of voices included in those spaces, to ensure that it's not possible to wildly misrepresent reality, because someone else will be in the room to say, no, no, that's not how it is. This is how it is for us. And so to have all of those voices present, really helps the truth to rise to the surface. Yes, Isabel. Thank you, Isabel. And we will, as we talk more about how to contribute our voices to these different channels, that I've just very briefly introduced, we will get into some of those concrete steps that we can take to really bring that reality, the reality of the people, into the global forum of the HLPF. And I will also talk about some of the ways that we can try to continue to respond, to continue to lift up that reality of the people, even after the forum, things that we can do together to shine a brighter light on places that are so often unheard. And so I will describe some of those detailed activities as we proceed today. But before I do, I also see the hand of Sister Julie. Please go ahead, Julie. Very good question. Now, I think in truth, the answer will be slightly different for each country. However, I do know that there are very broad concerns for every country that any funds that are being distributed through the UN for the purpose of development or humanitarian aid of some kind, there are pathways, there are protocols that that country is meant to follow in terms of reporting back on the use of those funds. But I do know that there are also huge challenges, really, I mean, in every country to do with corruption in government. And so there is a high likelihood that not every dollar or every choose your local currency that is distributed by the United Nations is genuinely used for the purpose for which it was intended, and does not necessarily end up in the pocket of some type of minister of government. And I think that is a challenge that the UN system is aware that they have, and is also one that they work regularly to try to forever be reducing that phenomenon. But it is definitely a challenge. And I think that concern is one that is very valid for the conversation that we will have at the HLPF. And it would make a lot of sense to raise concerns in that area. Particularly, I think when we speak about goal number 17, about partnerships, because the United Nations is nothing if not a space for partnership. At least that is what it is designed to be. And so if there are resources being shared through that space, through the UN system, from one country to another or one group of people to another, then there is a relationship and a responsibility there that needs to be respected. And so I think it's to bring up concerns of corruption or misuse of funds in any way is an important observation to bring to the conversation on partnerships. So that's something that we can continue to discuss as we advance in our analysis and prepare to make our own contributions to this forum. Yes, Sister Rita. Thank you so much, Rita. You are helping me in my presentation because we will absolutely offer specific names and even websites and contact information for groups in each of your countries who are engaged in this work of monitoring progress toward the SDGs and the work of presenting alternate or additional narratives to either support or critique or in some way point out falsehood in the report that is coming from government. So I will now, I think, proceed on to the next part of our input, which will include a response to that exact request. So once again, here is our fan or our array of different channels for input into the overall global narrative that will be discussed at the HLPF. And so let's talk about each one just a little bit more. So again, with the reports that will be made by governments as they present their VNRs or voluntary national reviews, they will each have just about 10 to 15 minutes to present their review before the whole community that is gathered there during the forum. And this, of course, is not nearly enough time to really present a comprehensive picture of reality, even if they have all the best intentions and are making their best effort. And so as a result of that restriction of time, you will see that it's very common for governments to focus almost exclusively on the positive news or the strengths that have emerged from their work toward achieving the SDGs. And that means that they will leave a lot of significant gaps in their story or in their narrative. Another common and unfortunate feature of many government reports is that they will tend to include either no input from civil society or very little input from civil society. But that being said, there are some, and we have seen this improving over the years, there will be some governments that will invite the input of certain members of civil society to actually take the floor and to speak during some of their allotted 10 to 15 minutes. But we are very wary or attentive to the fact that, of course, if someone has been selected by government, even to speak on behalf of civil society, there really is a significant chance that that group or that individual is at least has the potential to have some kind of bias in favor of the government, and that the government sort of selected them with some strings attached, we would say, with some requirement of them that they not present any information that is too challenging or too critical of what the government has presented. So in that way, the representative of civil society who is speaking alongside the government may not exactly be a truly independent entity. And sometimes it's kind of a funny name, but sometimes those individuals or those groups are referred to as gongos, meaning the G and the O before NGO, and the G and the O standing for government organized, which creates the very funny term government organized non-governmental organization. So, which is to say, it's simply another arm or even a puppet of government, a gongo. So it is possible that we may see some voices that fall under that category as well within the presentation that is made by government. So that is something for us to be attentive to. And that being said, there may be some members of civil society who are invited by government to genuinely share their independent perspective and who may present critiques of the government. And that is very refreshing. And I think that is something that we should respond to positively. So it's possible that we could hear it either way, and we should be open to that and also aware that there may be some bias that we are hearing when we hear from civil society who was kind of hand selected by government to be part of their presentation. But all to say that, of course, there is an important role for genuinely independent members of civil society. And of course, it is our role to observe when there are gaps in the narrative of government and to fill those gaps in the narrative with the other pieces of the story that we know and that we have experienced and that we have witnessed. It also is part of our role to hold governments accountable for all of the sustainable development goals. So where they may choose to focus on a couple parts of the agenda in which they feel they are particularly strong, it is also our job to say, okay, maybe you're doing some good work over here, but please don't forget these goals over here, where we are not seeing any progress. And again, this agenda, all of the goals are interconnected. They all need to be achieved together, or none of them will actually be achieved. So we cannot pick and choose, oh, we will succeed in this goal, and we will ignore the rest. It's not possible. The whole agenda is integrated, and it's our job to remind government of that and to ensure that they are approaching all the goals as one integrated whole. Another thing that we can offer as members of civil society is honestly offering our own good practices, our own lessons, experiences that we have had that have yielded good outcomes for people. Sharing those as examples to teach government what is actually working for the people, and hopefully to guide the mind and the hands of government to help implement more programs that are genuinely helpful to the people. And so we have a lot to share. We have a lot to teach in that regard. And if we can approach a forum like this as a place to share ideas with government and to guide government and inform government, we don't necessarily need to see them as adversaries, although sometimes that can be the case. But there really is an opportunity in a forum like this for us to be partners and for us to offer our experiences as a lesson to guide the work of government. And so that's something else that we can do in a space like this. And that other channel that I mentioned that is still largely government input, but through which we do have some possibility for participation, is those regional fora for sustainable development, which happen in advance of the global forum, which is the HLPF. And so there are, of course, there's one forum for each global region. And I have here on the screen the dates for each one for this year. So you can see the first one will be for the Asia Pacific region. And that is from the 25th to the 28th of February. And It is possible to follow that through live streaming on the YouTube channel for the UN office for that region. And so you will have this link in your mailbox when I share these slides later. And you can go directly there and follow some of those meetings when they're happening. And the same, there will be a forum for Western Asia from the 25th to the 28th of March. For Europe and North America on the 2nd and 3rd of April. For Africa from the 8th to the 10th of April. And for Latin America from the 25th to the 28th of April. And though these meetings occur in person, and almost, I would say very few, if any of us, will be attending them in person, it is possible to follow at least some part of them online. So anyone who has an internet connection is able to follow at least some component of each of these regional fora. And in addition to following the live proceedings, the actual meetings themselves, usually a forum like this will also produce some kind of report at the end. And so it will also be possible for all of us to take a look at the report, or possibly to some input that was given by our own government as part of this forum, as a way of informing ourselves. Even before we get to the HLPF, we can inform ourselves about the kind of narrative that our government is presenting. And we can also learn from the narratives and the ideas, the proposals of other governments in our same region who may have challenges that are more similar to our own country's challenges than perhaps a country on the opposite side of the world, and with whom we may share a different kind of understanding due to just being closer together, being neighbors in the world. And so as a way of preparing for the HLPF, we do encourage each of you to try to follow as much as you are able some of the proceedings of your own region's regional forum, and possibly a written report that will come out of that, just as a way of beginning to understand the narratives that are being shared. And also to begin to formulate your own critique of that narrative and what you would want to add to it. And now we get to that response to that last question that we had during our pause for questions and comments, which is how is it that we can connect to some of those networks, some of those organizations in our own country who are working together to monitor the implementation of the SDGs. And so I have done a bit of research into each of your countries to find out who is working on this monitoring and how you can connect with them. And so I have compiled a directory with all of that information, which I will share with you. But it's a wonderful way to get to connect with people who perhaps are working even in your same town or city, and to speak in a detailed way about the specific realities and challenges of your own country, as well as to share information about what you are hearing from government, or what you are hearing even from corporations or business, and to really exchange ideas and lessons with one another, and to present in a united voice and an alternate narrative to the narrative that the government may be presenting. And so there is at least one network of this kind in essentially every country. Some countries actually have multiple networks that are doing this kind of monitoring work. And each one will employ different methods when it comes to collecting input from the different organizations or communities that are within their country. Some of them are very, very active and will generate an independent report that they will submit to the HLPF every year as kind of a shadow or as a complement to the report that is presented by government. And another important thing to know about these networks is that they are typically open to the participation of anyone who is representing an NGO or a faith institution. And again, let me remind us that in the world of UN thinking and the UN system, we would be understood as congregations, we would be understood as NGOs. And again, I know that may seem a little funny and feel a little strange, but that is kind of within the understanding of the UN. If you are not government and you are a group, you are a non-government organization. And so usually these networks would be open to you as a member of the NGO that is your congregation, or perhaps if you are working through a smaller institution like a school that is operated by your congregation, or a health center or some other such institution, you might choose to connect with a network like this under the name or under the auspices of that smaller institution, as a way of kind of saying, we are here, we are local, this is our presence in the country, it is through this school or this health center, or this community organization, as a way of kind of sharing your local identity. And so this is just a visual to give you a preview of the directory that I will share with all of the civil society networks that are monitoring development progress in your respective countries. Okay, and one more very important piece of information for us to have right away, because we can begin this form of participation immediately, is that I mentioned earlier, there's something called major groups and other stakeholders, which are really just ways of organizing civil society, the giant world of civil society within the UN system. And so we would probably, each one of us could potentially identify as NGOs. Women's congregations might also say, well, we're also part of the women's major group. Those of you who are involved in running schools or who are working in schools might also identify as part of the group of academia, but certainly every one of us fits within at least one of these categories of groups of civil society. And some of us would fit within many of these different groups. But this channel for input is the perhaps most direct way of having your own voice and your own perspective included in the central official proceedings of the HLPF. So whereas written reports that are submitted by a civil society network, or events that are happening during the forum. These are all ways to contribute your voice, but this one, because it happens during the main official program of the HLPF, this is the way to contribute your ideas to the space in which you know your government will be present and listening. So it is the most, shall I say, hearty or robust way to have your ideas included in the message that civil society will put directly into the ears of your government. And not only that, it will be a space in which your voice is shared directly with all of the other governments who are present, who will be present in the room. And so it is a good way of holding your government accountable to say, not only are we paying attention as civil society of your own country, but we're also going to share what we know with all of your peers, your neighbors here, your other governments who are in the room, so that they are also aware of our part of the narrative. And we know they're not only hearing your part. And so that's it's a very powerful space in which to have the opportunity to have your ideas included. And so when it comes to participating in this channel, we really, really, really encourage you to make every effort to take advantage of this opportunity. And to say exactly how that works, there is a team that is formed that is comprised of civil society from each of the countries who will present a VNR this year. And it is kind of self-organized with some support from people who have been part of this forum and who have seen the process for many years. But the task that the group will share is to create a written response that will be delivered out loud in person immediately following the presentation of your country's government during the forum. And so what is said, the statement can include very specific questions that you would like the government representatives to answer. And it can also include your own observations that you expect will not be included in the report of the government in order to ensure that certain aspects of your reality of the truth are heard in that global forum. And so it is, again, a very powerful space, and it is available to us to have our voices included there. But we have to do that by joining the VNR team from our country. And again, that's organized through this mechanism, this group called the Major Groups and Other Stakeholders. But you join the team that will just be you and civil society members from your country who will work together to create a very short statement and perhaps a question that you would like to be presented to your government representatives immediately after they make their presentation to all of the leaders of the world who will be there. And so there is a form that you will need to fill out in order to join that team. And I will bring that up on the screen in just a moment so that you are able to see what it looks like, and also to offer a couple of clarifications, because there will be a couple of points in there that you might not be sure what answer you are supposed to give. And so I want to make you aware of those. First of all, I will put the link to the form in the chat box in case you would like to open it now on your own device. So the link that I just put into the chat box is the link to the form you will need to complete in order to join the VNR team for your country. And that link will also be shared in the slides and the emails that follow this call. But if you want to open it and look at it now, you can follow the link in the chat box. And I will also bring it up on our Zoom screen here. Okay, so as you can see, the form is available in multiple languages, English, Spanish, French, Russian, Arabic. And there are some pretty standard parts to it. First, just your name, your email, your organization. And again, here for organization, you can put the name of your congregation. Or if your congregation has an NGO that has a presence at the UN, you can use that version of your name too. Either one is okay. Your job title, organization's website. Again, you could put the main website for your congregation as a whole, or I know many of you have kind of subsidiary websites as well. You could put the website for your NGO at the UN. Anything will work. And then under question number 6, where they ask for the scope of work of your organization, you can choose between global, regional, national, and subnational or local. And this really has to do with the size of your congregation. If you are an international congregation, you can select global. If you are only in one region or one country, if you're only in one region, you could select regional. If you are only within one country, you can select national. And if you are a local congregation, like a diocesan congregation, you could even select subnational or local. Okay, then this question number 7, are you affiliated with any of the NGOs constituencies? Okay, this refers again to all of those little blue circles that were on a slide earlier. It's essentially asking which groups do you identify with? And so one that absolutely everyone here can select is this one for NGOs. Sorry, I should make this bigger for you all. This box here for NGOs is one that everyone on this call is able to select. And if you wish, you can also select additional groups, but you do not need to. You can just select NGOs and leave it at that. That is enough. Then coming to question number 8, you are simply asked to say which country's team you would like to join. So just look for the name of the country that you are representing as a delegate in this program and select that. And then they will ask exactly how you are connected to that country. So just simply say, you know, I'm originally from that country, and I also live and work there now. Or you could say, I am from the country originally, but I'm currently in a different country. That's the second option. And then for some of you, particularly those who maybe are in leadership somewhere, you could say, I'm not from the country and I do not live there, but my work is related to that country. You know, I'm responsible for a province that includes that country, something like that. You would select this third option. And then this fourth one probably would not apply to anyone because that is for someone who is not from the country and does not do work related to the country. And most probably that person, anyone who selects that option probably will not proceed in the process because they will not have anything to offer in terms of insight about the country. So really, you're just looking at one of these first three options. And then finally, question number 10 is an invitation to participate in creating this joint statement that I was speaking about. The response that will be given after the government makes their presentation. And so our purpose in filling out this form will be that you select one of these first three options, that you will participate in crafting that statement. And which of the three you pick depends on how you are able to participate. And so the first one is simply asking, yes, I want to participate, and I can do that by joining online meetings. So you can, if you're able to join online meetings, you can select that one. Then the second one is if you want to follow the process. So this is really someone who just wants to listen, but not necessarily to contribute any ideas to the process. So you could select this one, but I think you each have valuable ideas to share. So I really would hope that you would select the first option rather than that, and just trust that even if you are feeling unfamiliar with the UN, you have something important to offer, and you will have insights to share. You will be able to engage actively as you proceed. And then the third option is if you think you will have difficulty with online meetings due to technological capacity or electricity or some other challenge, but you know you can follow what is happening and participate by email, then you can select this third option. I will follow by email. So I hope you will select either the first or the third options from this list. But the fourth option is if you're really not sure, if you're able to have the time to be part of the process, you can select the fourth option, and they will still include you in the email exchange that is happening among the group. But you're just saying you're not quite sure if you will have much time to dedicate to following or contributing to the process. And then the next questions have to do with the way that they are assessing if people in civil society feel safe in raising their voices about what is happening in their country. And so they're asking, do you feel safe? Do you feel secure in participating in this process? And you can select yes or no, as depending on your perspective. And if you do select yes, they ask you to just give a quick description of exactly what your concerns are. And then they're asking, have you engaged in the VNR process with your government directly, either this year or in a previous year? And if any of you has done that, I will be very curious to hear about it and to learn how the process was for you. But most likely, in most of our countries, we were not invited by government to have a voice in their process of their voluntary national review. And so most likely we will be selecting this last box, which is to say, no, I have not participated with government in creating their report. And then the last is just to say, if you have a question that you know you would like to propose that the government needs to answer, that you would hope might be presented to the government during the forum, you can propose a question that could be asked of them. And it's important to understand here that because there will be many people participating from civil society, from your country, that your exact question or your ideas probably won't be in the statement in exactly the way that you present them, but hopefully through collaboration with the other members of the team from your country, the heart of your question and the main idea of your critiques will be represented in the statement that is delivered during the forum. So this is it's not a promise just to put your question in this box. There is no promise being made that that exact question will be asked of the government, but it is a first step in adding your voice to the process, and is an important first step to having your ideas included in that statement. And then the question number 15 is about whether you personally will be attending in person, if you will be coming to New York for this forum. And so that may be a yes for some of you. It is probably a no for most of you. And so for most people, you'll select the last option, no, I'm not going. But the other options are to say, yes, I'm definitely going, and I have all of the details are confirmed. I have a visa, I have funding, I am coming. The second option is to say, I am planning to come, but I still need to wait to hear if I will have a visa. So you can select that second option. And then the third option is simply, I do not know. There is some possibility that I will come, but I really am not sure. So that's the third option. But again, most of us, it will be a no, I am not going. And that doesn't mean you can't participate. It does mean you will participate online. Okay, and then this last point is just they are saying that your response to this form, they are going to be keeping it in their collection, their data collection, and it will not, it's not going to be public information, but they will use it to communicate with you, of course, as is a necessary part of the follow-up. So you just simply need to select that you agree that they can receive and keep your information for the purpose of continuing this process. And then you submit. So it is a bit of a long form, but not a very complicated one. And if anyone has any questions or problems as you are trying to complete that form, you can feel free to write to me, or we can even set up a call and work on it together, just to ensure that everyone who wants to submit that form is able to do it with no trouble. And again, that is perhaps the most powerful way that you can contribute your voice to this forum process. So we really, really, really strongly encourage you to seize that opportunity. And even if you're feeling unsure about what you might want to say, we will work on that. We will develop that. But the first step is to join the team, to join the conversation. And so I hope you will all feel free and strong enough to do that. Okay. So we've spoken about how to contribute to the statement of the major groups VNR teams during the forum. Another opportunity I want to share with you is that the NGO major group specifically always produces what they call a position paper. And this is a detailed written statement that is submitted to the forum each year. And it focuses on the 5 priority SDGs for the year and tends to put a strong emphasis on highlighting the interconnections among those 5 SDGs. And the process for drafting this paper typically happens between the months of March and June for each year. And if you would like to take a look to see what those kinds of papers look like, I have a link included in the slides here. So you can visit that page and get a sense of what kind of paper you might be contributing to. And if you like the look of that and you are someone who enjoys kind of working on language and putting words on paper in a powerful way, then I will encourage you to join the team that will draft that paper over the next few months. And right now, there is no form available to join that team, but we do expect that it will be available soon, and I will share it with you when that becomes available. And then I also spoke about another channel, which is having events, sponsoring events of our own that happen either during the forum or in the case of JCoR, we have a series of events that we sponsor in the week after the forum. And the things that happen during the forum are typically panel discussions or some other kind of interactive dialogue that feature people and their perspectives from civil society on how much progress is or is not being made toward the SDGs. And then in our sessions, which we sponsor the week after the forum, we call those the JCoR SDG Labs. And those will be happening this year from the 28th of July through the 1st of August. And the way that we organize that lab is that it's actually a series of 5 different sessions that are happening one day after the other. And each session is dedicated to one of those priority SDGs. So there's a theme for each day. And as a kind of a capstone or a culmination of your participation in this program, you are called upon to be a participant and a contributor to at least one of those 5 sessions. And you'll be asked to offer some comments that can cover, you can take several different approaches to what you would like to share. Some of you may choose to use that time to highlight your own observations of the progress or lack of progress toward that SDG in your country, in the place where you are in ministry. Some of you may choose to use that space to offer a critique of the presentation that was made by your country's government to say, here were the gaps, or here were some things that were false. And another thing that you might do with that space is to share a good practice or a recommendation that you would like to offer to your government based on some project or ministry that you or your congregation is involved in that contributes to the achievement of the SDG that is the theme for the day. And these sessions are all open to the public, so you are able to invite anyone from your congregation or your local community to attend. And they are all completely online. So no matter where you are in the world, if you have an internet connection, you are able to participate. And if you are not sure if your internet connection will be good enough, we can also make preparation in advance for you to be able to kind of pre-record your comments and your sharing so that your voice can still be heard in that space. And we will talk a great deal more about that and help you to prepare for that as we get closer to the end of the program. But for now, I simply wanted to make you aware that we are building toward that kind of project at the end of our session together, at the end of our program. So come the end of July, you can look forward to offering your reflections and your critiques and your recommendations in the JCoR SDG lab. So to sum all of that up, what comes next is, again, you will have a forum on sustainable development for your global region sometime in the next 3 months. So for Asia Pacific, that is coming up just at the end of this month. For Western Asia, it will be in March. For Europe and North America, at the very beginning of April. For Africa, a little bit further into the month of April. And for Latin America and the Caribbean, at the very end of April. So just to make you aware of when all of those are happening, and I will share the links to help you follow those fora online. And as you follow them, there are some guiding questions that may help you to process the information that you're hearing. And these questions we will raise together many times as we hear from governments throughout this training program. We will ask ourselves, where does my personal experience align with the report that is being shared here by my government? Where does my experience conflict with the report or the presentation that is being shared? And then what is missing? What are the additional insights or recommendations that I would contribute because they are not being reflected or addressed here? So where do I have alignment? Where do I see conflict? And what is missing? Again, that form that we reviewed together, that you are to submit as soon as possible, but definitely before the 15th of March. So if you have not already opened it from the chat box, you may want to do that now. Or if not, do it as soon as you receive my email that follows up from this call, so that you can ensure that you are part of the VNR team that will respond to government on behalf of civil society from your country. And another homework assignment that I give to all of us is to make an effort between now and our next call to make a connection, to make contact with a member of the civil society network that is monitoring SDG progress in your country. And again, I will share that directory with you, so you will have the names of the group that you want to connect with. And it can be a very simple first connection, just to reach out, to introduce yourself, to share your name, your congregation, perhaps which of the SDGs you are working on personally, and then to ask if the network is preparing a report that is meant to accompany the forum this year. And if they are preparing a report of any kind, to ask how you can contribute to that report. How can you be part of that process? So just a few simple things to include in that first reaching out to that network in your country. And it often takes a bit of time to get a response from those networks. So I will encourage you to do that as soon as you possibly can, to ensure that you do not miss out on the opportunity to be part of whatever work they may be doing to prepare for the forum. And finally, as a reminder, our next call with this whole global group will be on the very last day of March, and it will be at the same time as today for most of us. Though those who are in Europe or North America, we will have a change in our clocks between now and then. So just to remind you that for us, for those in Europe and North America who change our clocks, that next global call will actually be an hour later. And for everyone else, it will stay the same. So only if your clocks are changing do you need to think about that. And again, I will share a recording from our call today. I will share the slides from our call today. All of that will be shared by email. I have also attempted to create a WhatsApp group for all of us, though I did encounter a difficulty in that because it was such a large group of new contacts. WhatsApp was concerned that I was sending spam to all of you, and that it was not a legitimate effort. So right now my account is temporarily frozen. I hope that it will be resolved very soon. And after that, we will all be able to share details and reminders in that WhatsApp group, as well as email, because I know many of us are more regularly attentive to WhatsApp than to email. So we will try to make life as easy as possible when it comes to remembering future meetings and having all of the links that we need to different forms and different resources. And one last point, that there are still two groups that are going to have their regional call in which they will meet one another and get to know one another. And so one of those is today in just a little while. It's starting at 9:30 in Central America time, 11:30 Dominican Republic time, 10:30 New York time. So those who are joining us from Latin America and the Caribbean, I hope you will be able to come back online for that call, which will be much less formal and maybe a little more fun. And for those who are from Europe and North America, we will have that regional call later this week on the 19th of February, and that will be at 1400 Central Europe time and 8 in the morning US Eastern time. And you will have that link in your mailbox also. So as we close today, are there any critical questions that anyone has about any of the information that was shared in the later part of the presentation?
Teresa,
Yes, Melba, please.
yeah, just I would like to encourage all of us not to be afraid to participate because this is a beautiful experience. And the thing is then we are going to do step by step. Now we could feel overwhelming with all the information and all the procedures, but the most important thing is that our voice could be heard and we could be voice for lost and voiceless. And that's why it's really I am going to do my best in this because I have we as a communication have missions in 3 of the countries who are going to have their national volunteering review. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Melba. And Yamile. Great and very important question. Thank you. So if you complete the form that I was sharing on the screen, that information is kept private. It is not public information. So that will be kept secure and you are able to be part of that team that is creating the statement. You can do that without your name ever appearing anywhere publicly. So you can be as anonymous as you need and as you want to be. And the same when it comes to the events that we sponsor, the SDG Lab. We have ways that we can also enable you to participate in that without attaching your name in any way that could put you at risk. So we will take every precaution as needed, and you can feel safe in your participation. I understand. Yes, that is a very legitimate concern. Okay. So with that, I do promise to share all of these slides and all of the links with you by email. And if the technology gurus are willing, I will also share it with you by WhatsApp. But definitely I will share it by email. So please watch for that. And we will proceed to the many exciting activities that we are called to engage in between now and our next global call on the 31st of March. So thank you all again very much for your valuable time. It is so wonderful to be with you. And again, I am sorry that I fill so much of our time with my speaking, but as we proceed through our program together, I look forward to hearing more and more from all of you. And a final word of thanks also to our interpreters, Anna and Vivian, who are making it possible for all of us to connect today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.